Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Providence City Chambers for Tuesday, March 17th. Today, for our regular meeting, a special committee on health, opportunity, prosperity, and education, known as also of H.O.P.E. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Pichardo,
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Peterson,
Present.
Councilor Andover,
Present.
Councilor Royas,
Present.
Councilor Sanchez, 5 present, no absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Would everybody rise, please? Do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 1?
Item 1, an ordinance amending Chapter 13 Housing of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Providence to add the next appropriate article, the Providence Rent Stabilization Act.
Thank you. Before us, we have the sponsor of the legislation, Council President Rachel Miller.
Thank you, Chairman Pichardo. I am right now flanked very officially on either side by our Chief of Staff, June Rose, and Aaron Easter Gardner, our Deputy Chief of Staff and Policy Director. But I'm just going to go through the initial amendments in front of you. 2 things. One, I want to thank this committee in particular, of course, every committee of the council, but this committee in particular and the other councilors who have joined for every one of these meetings. We have heard hours of public testimony. We'll continue to hear probably hours of public testimony. This is a really important process, and you are incredible stewards of it, so I just wanted to thank you. 2, I wanted to wish you a very happy St. Patrick's Day. So the amendments in front of us are based on feedback from public hearings, from public comment, from some meetings we've had with a variety of developers and low-income housing developer organizations, and many of these changes are just tightening up the language, so I'm not going to go over those, just making sure that we refer to the board in the same way on every page, making sure we refer to an apartment in the same way on every section of the ordinance. I won't go over those, I'll just go over what's substantial. So, number 1, on page 3, which is in the definition section, and this is something that came up repeatedly from both proponents and opponents of this legislation, just a more comprehensive definition of substantial rehabilitation. That includes, we're talking about 2 major building systems getting redone. We're talking about costs that exceed or equal to 15% of the fair market value of the property. And so we're just being crystal clear about what we mean by substantial rehabilitation. We do not mean ongoing maintenance, which is already required by law. On page 4, section 1371, again, heard this from a number of sources, that there's times that weren't articulated in the ordinance already when an apartment might be empty for a period of time and not on the market. So in that case, it is very likely that the property owner will want a process to go to the board and make adjustments in the base rent. So we just included a few more cases during which an apartment would be vacant for a period of time. Those include involuntarily from foreclosure, receivership, tax sale, into the already existing definition. Under the section C of the same section 1371, under the utilities section, we heard concerns raised about specific circumstances where utilities are not metered by the unit. And so just giving the board specific instructions to a process for which landlords might seek relief in those cases. On that same section, 1371D, and appreciated feedback from many renters that January is not the right time. If we're going to set an annual time of year, it ought to be July 1st. In January, there are many other expenses that happen, and so being able to plan around an annual increase in July makes sense. Okay. 1372, page 6, 1372, C, which is major renovations and reconfigurations. 4, we just put substantial rehabilitation, that same definition, into the body of the bill. And now we are at 1374, section J. We heard a lot of feedback from, again, people speaking in for, people speaking against, people who are yes-anding in public testimony, that we just wanted to be more specific about what the board is doing. And so you'll see a few amendments that address that. In this one in particular, we are saying that the board sets the date by which the rule, regulation, and ruling on a certain property takes place. So that is not left up to chance. Section 1377, that is the next one, right? Yes, 1377A2. So this is a hat tip to the Rhode Island ACLU for calling out that particular definition, misinformation, spreading false or misleading information, is protected speech under the Constitution, under the free speech. And so we removed it. Page 12, section 1377E. This we move to a later section in the ordinance. I will cover when we get there. Section 1378. Okay, so now we're into the section that covers exemptions, which is probably where we're talking about some of the most substantial changes that are before you. Sections I and J. So we rewrote those to more clearly define and cover the various different programs that are subsidized affordable, subsidized low income. They match state programs and federal programs. We did that in alignment with the community of nonprofit and low-income housing developers that operate in the city of Providence. Section K, also under exemptions, moved the, and we did this in another section as well, but to be in alignment with housing programs statewide, moved it to 4 units. So in this case, from 5 to 4 units. In the next case, from 3 to up to 4. So equalizing them all to 4. In this case, we're talking about, this is the 1+1. So a rental unit located in a housing accommodation containing no more than 4 instead of 5, where the owner occupied. It's a further definition of that. In 1378, okay, so this was probably universally the least supported by everyone piece of the ordinance. This is where we were talking about exemptions for new construction, and so there's 2, well, really 3 primary adjustments to exemptions for new construction. The very first changes the period of exemption from 15 years to 10 years. We heard from sponsors of the ordinance in particular, so from many of you and other colleagues on the council. We heard from housing developers, smaller sized housing developers and low-income developers. We heard from advocates overwhelmingly that 15 years was a little too long. So down to 10 years of exemption. However, if there is a 20-year exemption available if labor standards are adhered to. Those are the same labor standards that we outline in the tax stabilization agreement. So on the first, we're talking about apprentice utilization at 10% of labor hours. talking about prevailing wage, and finally, in this section, we established that from passage, we will go back in time 5 years to exempt new construction over the last 5 years. Section N of the same section moves, this is where we go from, this article shall not apply to rental units in a building containing 1 to 4 units as opposed to 1 to 3. Again, just to adhere to state and federal policies around that talk about buildings of units of 1 to 4. Okay, and now in section 1379, enforcement. We created a home for enforcement of the ban that we passed last year on algorithmic pricing. This is critical. This is, just to remind all of us, this is a ban on the use of tech that has been proven to artificially increase rent. So that in many, many places that it was used, property owners were charging a rent much higher than they would have if they used their own market information, if they used the other data in front of them. Section 1384. So these amendments speak to advice from other people who have served on boards across the city of Providence. It was something we knew we wanted to address. As my co-sponsors, I know we've all talked about addressing how to speak about compensation for members of the rent board. And so the amendment sets compensation for the board chair at $12,000 per year, and for each of the 4 other members at $10,000 per year. That is a $52,000 additional cost, and is something that can be, of course, amended by ordinance and by subject to the Salary Review Commission. And 1385 in the administration section, by request of Mayor Smiley's administration, we removed a sentence that they felt could be construed to be overly permissive. So 1385E, we struck funds shall be sufficient to ensure full implementation of the board's duties. And then finally, this was really at the advice of good government proponents everywhere, so we heard it from a lot of different places, that we had already kind of nodded to public rulemaking procedures as designated by the city and the state, but we spelled those out. So there is a publicly vetted, that includes notice, that includes what has to be included in that notice, right? So every rule that the rent board might make, spelled out, made clear before the public, open to a public hearing prior to finalization by the board. And then finally, in 1392, again, just being explicit on the types of rules expected to be set by the board and the executive director of the rent board. And that covers the amendments in front of you. Again, anything that I didn't cover is just to create some consistency in how we're naming things. So I just want to, again, thank you for the way and the process by which you are vetting this. I believe in these amendments. I believe in this ordinance quite clearly. And then I think there's two pieces that I just want to share. We have heard from so many people, some of them sharing like hope for their families, hope for their neighborhoods, hope for themselves, some of them sharing strong concerns that we are addressing and trying to address, some of them sharing just misinformation. And I think that is challenging, and we will do our best, as we always do, to make sure that people have the information in front of us. And I just, there's 2 things. One, I think as humans, we, not just elected officials, but as human people, we have an opportunity to work with whatever power is in front of us. And this is the power in front of us right now. To change the rules for people who live in poverty, for people who live in fear, for people who live in instability. This is one of our moments to do that. We have done that in the past. We have a moment, the second part of that, right, is we have a moment to do that without undoing the good work that this council has already done this term to build more housing, to develop more housing, to create more access to housing. And so, again, thank you. These are the amendments, and I'm happy to discuss them further.
Thank you, President Miller. Also, with you, and for our benefit, we have obviously our Chief of Staff, June Rose, and also Aaron as Deputy Chief of Staff and Senior Policy. And also we have Miguel on the left-hand side. So if you have any points of clarification from this committee, please ask now. If not, we'll move on. In addition to having the staff at hand, we also like to recognize Councilwoman Mary Kay Harris. Thank you for being here, and also Councilwoman Jill Davison, and also Councilman John Goncalves. We also have City Solicitor Sophia Weaver for joining us, and also our staff and our team from the clerk's office, Lauren Gutierrez and Tyler Crowder. So seeing no further question, I would like to question Councilwoman Peterson.
Thank you. Sorry, I felt that it was important to highlight, and I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more. You have a definition here of substantial rehabilitation, and I'd like to ask if you could just go into a little bit more depth about specifically what substantial rehabilitation means, because I know that there are people here that are eager to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, happily, and I know this came up again from everyone in some of the public hearings. So it defines in a few ways comprehensive renovation that extends the life of the apartment, of the dwelling unit, that offers replacement or substantial upgrade of two or more major systems like plumbing, electrical, HVAC, absolutely refers to structural elements, roofing, support, foundation, beams, covers direct labor, material cost, and soft fees like architectural and service fees. And we're talking about renovations that equal or exceed 15% of the fair market value of the property following the completion of the rehab. Sure.
Yeah, so that definition is new, but also the ways in which we now will treat those properties under the ordinance is new. So as the council president explained, we're talking about rehabilitation that functionally brings this up to being essentially a new apartment. And so it will have the opportunity, I'll say it first kind of in a wonkier term, and then I'll explain what it means. So the way that substantial rehabilitation will be treated once they've petitioned the rent board is as receiving a one-time vacancy decontrol. And so what that means in the ways we actually speak is that rather than only being able to increase the rent by 4%, if the rent board determines this was or will be substantial rehabilitation, they have the one-time opportunity to set a new base rent. So it's not governed by the 4%, it's a new base rent with new tenants. And so that's how that process will be handled.
Yes. Go ahead.
Sorry, so just because I need it to be broken down for me in layman's terms, can I give you an example and you tell me if this is off the mark or
Yeah.
right on the money?
Yeah.
Prior tenant moves out. there's a substantial amount of structural rehabilitation that needs to be done, just like what we've discussed here, but that includes like upgrades to cabinets, piping, anything of the air conditioning, painting, window, whatever. I'm not a landlord, so I don't know. But all of that would allow you, not based necessarily on an amount, but would allow you to reestablish a different market rate rent on a one-time basis?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes. Not cabinets,
Not cabinets, got it.
but the other ones you listed, yes.
But all the other stuff, like,
Yes,
I
if they
guess-
were load-bearing cabinets, I suppose, but yes.
I guess I'm trying to understand because, I mean, we all do renovations in our own homes, right? So I know how much I've spent for the things in my house, and those are substantial,
Yes.
at least in my eyes, and my paycheck. So I'm trying to understand what exactly feeds that, because it's, you know, obviously they're different, but it's important to know like what that would be, right?
Yes. So it's spelled out in this amendment. Two of the ones you listed, so you said piping, so plumbing, and you said air conditioning, HVAC. Those are two that are included. So it's two major building systems, and then in the amendments, it says which may include, and then lists plumbing, electrical, HVAC, structural elements, roofing, or load-bearing components. And this can also be defined by future board regulations. So in those cases, it's exactly how you described it, Councilwoman, where they would get to set a new base rent, new tenants and a new rent.
Thank you. Any further questions? Further questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, if you could please provide me with the list of speakers. Councilwoman Sue Anwa would like to make a comment.
I just wanted to make a comment about what we just discussed that Councilwoman Peterson brought up. That sounds like reflecting on it, sounds like a really reasonable exception. I know I've talked with some folks who are like, well, what if I do a really substantial rehab between tenants and that costs a substantial amount of money to really bring up some of the really old housing we have in the city to bring it up into better repair. And that is substantially different than like you did like just a paint job. And I've lived in both types of units where like someone did a really substantial amount of work in between and you can tell that there was like a lot of really great work done versus like a quick paint job and there was like a bug painted on the wall, which is totally something that happened in an apartment that I lived in. Just paint it right in. And those are totally different scenarios. And so I thought we were just saying that seemed like a really reasonable exemption for vacancy decontrol.
Thank you. At this moment, what we'll do is we'll move to the public comment, and we'll also have an opportunity afterwards of the public comment to discuss among ourselves, if you don't
Sorry,
mind.
Chair.
Yes?
Sorry, could I just make one public comment?
Sure.
Be fast.
Councilman Rice.
I won't repeat what my colleague just said, but it'll be something different. What I appreciate is the spelling out of the rulemaking process suggested by the ACLU. I think we understood that in my view had already existed in the previous draft, but to spell it out, because I think there's maybe some distrust out there regarding that this board could go rogue and run away. And I think having that clearly spelled out in legal jargon might make that better for some folks. So
Right.
that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now what we'll do is move forward with the public comment. Everyone will have 2 minutes. For cover 2 minutes, we're going to have people address the amendments. Perhaps many of you have received it already through our notification that we put out, but also we'll let you have the 2 minutes. We have a timer on the right side. She will keep you on task, so that way we can get through this process as smooth as possible. Thank you very much. The first person I have is Shannon Russell. Against? Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you. Okay, this is really far out. So, good evening. I am Shannon Russell. I manage over 100 properties here in Providence with over 1,000 tenants. While this proposal is being described as rent stabilization, it clearly functions as rent control, and I don't feel that any amount of amendments are going to change that fundamental reality. First, the ordinance will discourage housing investment. Reducing the new construction exemption and adding conditions creates uncertainty and sends a clear message to developers and housing providers that your ability to operate here will be restricted. Over time, that means less houses get built, not more. Second, it fails to reflect the real economics of operating housing. Costs like taxes, insurance, utilities, and labor continue to rise unpredictably. While the ordinance allows petitions to a rent board, that process adds a delay, bureaucracy, and uncertainty. Housing providers cannot operate effectively if basic decisions require approval from a board. Third, this creates a costly new bureaucracy the city cannot afford. Former Mayor Angel Tavares recently warned that Providence's own chief financial officer estimated the cost would be between $10 and $17 million. Even the council's own consultant acknowledges potential revenue loss if property values decline. At a time when the city faces real budget constraints, this is a serious risk. Fourth, the policy does not reflect the realities of Providence's housing market. Student housing, which I specialize in, has high turnover, heavy wear and tear, and seasonal cycles. Limiting flexibility will reduce the willingness of providers to serve this segment, a major part of the city's housing supply. And finally, the public concern is significant. The council has already received hundreds more letters opposing this ordinance than they have for those supporting it. That should signal that the risks and unintended consequences are very real. Providence needs more housing, not more restrictions on the housing we already have. I urge the council to reconsider this approach and focus on policies that encourage investment, increase supply, and support responsible housing providers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to also leave your statement, that we leave it with the Sergeant at Arms. Thank you. Next, before us, Autumn Gioletti, Rhode Island AFL-CIO. Welcome. 4.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Autumn Gia. I'm the political director with the Rhode Island AFL-CIO. We are a federation of unions, and we represent a little over 16,000 workers in the city of Providence. I want to thank the councilwoman and staff for the thoughtful explanations earlier that we heard, and we are in full support of this ordinance. We represent members who live and work in this city. And whatever these workers might win on the picket line or during bargaining sessions is quickly evaporated in the face of unpredictable and often outrageous rent increases. Rent stabilization, like a collective bargaining agreement or a project labor agreement, creates a predictable and fair environment for everybody and protects workers. Cities benefit when its workers are actually its residents. Schools are better when teachers know the neighborhoods. Hospitals are more efficient when frontline workers live nearby. I could go on and on. But really, this is just another tool for struggling workers to stay in their homes, to continue serving the city of Providence, and eliminates a race to the bottom environment for landlords. So thank you so much for your consideration today.
Thank you. Next, we have John Shima? Sherman? Against?
I want to speak to the exemption section of the ordinance. Some of this potentially affects me personally, and other sections I don't understand why we're doing them. I own a 2-family. I would like to make it a 4-family. I don't know if under the 1 to 4 family, I will be allowed to add that 2 additional units at a later date and still be exempt from the paragraph N in the exemptions. I should be, but it's not clear. And I've talked to 2 people involved in this process and an attorney, and I can't get a consensus. I sent a letter through my city councilor outlining my concerns on February 16th. That was forwarded to Miguel. I'm not sure who Miguel is, but I've received no response. Okay? There's also a special exemption that if you own 2 properties, you can exempt up to 8 units. Why the special provision that if you own 2 properties? If we want to allow an exemption of up to 8 units, it should be across the board for owner-occupied. In other words, if I own an owner-occupied 6-unit building, all 6 units should be exempt. If it's 8 units, all 8 should be exempt. If I own a 2-family owner-occupied and I own 3 additional 2-families, 8. Why do you have to own 2 properties to get that exemption? Last thing, new construction. If an owner can add additional units to his property, they are not exempt, even though they are brand new construction. And I don't think that is fair if what your objective is to generate as many new rental units as possible. I am going to follow up with the committee with my letter that was sent to my city councilor.
Thank you.
For follow-up. Thank you.
Can you just restate your name and your address?
Sure. John Sherman, 28 Bolston Lane,
Do you know who your city council person is?
Althea Graves.
All right, thank you
Ward
very
12.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lena Ronian, 4. If you could restate your name and your address, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lena Roman, and I'm living in Providence, 81 Messina Street, 02908. I'm a certified community health worker, and I'm here because I'm a member from Sister Fire, and I would like to go housing stability, has shaping every major decision in my community. As a community health worker, I do work with clients and also some patients that I do home visits. And when I do that, like, I've been horrible things in the apartments. I've been like seeing walls peeling, painting off. I'm seeing like roaches, mice. I'm seeing like mold on the walls. And people living in those conditions are horrible. And landlords don't doing anything about it because most of the people has people who has a status for immigration, and they are afraid to talk to the landlords in case that they have retaliation. So most of those families, they have low-income families, so they can afford it to be increasing the rents, and they can ask for being repairs apartments because they are afraid. Because of this, most families spend most of their income and the rent and the land. And also those kids have medical conditions because I work with them. They have asthma, they have also allergies, and they have other conditions like lead in the blood. So I'm here to support, the rent stabilization, and support the stabilization because it creates predictability and protects tenants, shouldn't increase, and gives the families the room to breathe. Now people has a question, do I pay my rent or do I pay what I'm gonna eat on the table? So that's very hard that I hear every day from families, and that's all what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mike Pereira. Against?
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This ordinance does nothing to increase housing supply, which is the one thing we know actually brings prices down. Instead, it discourages investment, slows new construction, and signals to both small property owners and large developers that Providence is a riskier place to build and maintain housing. And the unintended consequence doesn't stop there. Take the amendment on repairs. Under the proposal, a property owner cannot recover costs unless the work exceeds 15% of the property's value and involves major system overhauls. That is an extraordinarily high bar. It means that even significant necessary work, like addressing safety issues, complying with lead laws, or replacing aging components, cannot be reflected in rent. And even if the threshold is met, these costs cannot be passed on until a new tenant moves in. So what is the real-world result? Repairs get delayed, maintenance gets deferred, housing quality declines. And ultimately, the very people that we are trying to protect, tenants, end up living in worse conditions with fewer options. There are also serious structural concerns here. The ordinance creates a board with the power to dictate pricing and determine when owners can adjust rents, while simultaneously reducing incentives for new construction and increasing regulation on existing units. That combination introduces uncertainty at exactly the moment we should be encouraging for more housing, not less. If we truly want to help renters, we need to focus on solutions that work. That means building more housing. It means removing barriers to development. It means targeted rental assistance for those who need it most. We can care deeply about renters, and we should, but we also have to be honest. Policies that shrink supply and discourage maintenance will not make housing more affordable. It will make it scarcer, and it will make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Justice Gaines. 4.
Hello, my name is Justice Gaines. I'm an organizer with Sister Fire and a resident of Ward 11. We are supportive of some of these amendments and want to name specifically the default date anniversary being changed to July is a great shift based on what was said earlier, as well as establishing compensation for board members so lower income board members and residents actually can afford to be part of this board and offer their lived experience to making sure that tenants, renters, and landlords get a fair shot here in Providence. Also, what I will say, based on Sister Fire's mutual aid that it has done for the last 8 years, we have supported hundreds of families and individuals, both in Providence and across Rhode Island, around housing support, utility support, grocery support, and generally making sure that their needs could be met. What happens when you only focus on rental assistance is that the need never ends. This right now is a structural change to support tenants. It is a structural change to support renters in Providence that we may not get another shot at. And it is critical that we get it done. It is critical that instead of just throwing money at the problem, throwing money at the market, we actually create something that gives tenants the ability to say what's going on in their building, to say, okay, maybe I can plan for next year and have long-term ability to understand how much my rent might increase and why it is increasing. That transparency is not something right now that renters here are afforded, and this bill is the first thing that actually gives them the power to know what's going on in their life and be able to plan for the future so that we can keep our families in our neighborhoods and so that we can keep Providence residents in Providence. Thank you for your continued work on this, and we hope to see this bill continue to be improved and passed.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Shannon Weinstein. If everyone that's going to speak, if you could please introduce yourself again and also where you live or who do you represent. That would be great. Thank you.
Yep. My name is Shannon Weinstein, and I'm back to testify on behalf of the Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers. To answer your question, I am an owner at RentProv Realty, and we employ many residents of Providence. Most of our employees are from Providence. I personally am a landlord, property manager, realtor, and contractor of almost 20 years, which is reflective of the multiple hats members of the coalition wear. Although we already know that rent control ordinance is inherently unproductive and fails to meet the true needs of the community, we will say that we were surprised that the proposed amendments took a course that was clearly worse and did not demonstrate a desire to serve the needs of renters in our city. The amendments, in fact, restrict the housing market even more and also increased public spending towards the administration of this policy, which is already expected to cost the city millions. These millions are not only in operating expenses, but tax base reduction, as well as reduced revenue growth for years to come. The regulation of Section 8 units now creates a double regulation sure to create a disservice to those who rely on the Section 8 program, a true positive example of public-private partnership. Providence is our capital city. Every Rhode Islander has a stake in what happens in the capital city, and its well-being is essential to the economic vibrancy it has to offer. Yes, every Rhode Islander are concerned with cost of groceries, healthcare, utilities, and housing, and that is why we must take steps to create intentional policies that address these concerns. Any form of rent control is not it. Although I am often very assertive in statements, I will take this opportunity to ask, who does this policy truly intend to serve? It is clear that the end result will not be favorable for renters in Providence who this policy is advertised to help. Simply put, we remain in opposition to this policy in favor of alternative proven policies that work towards affordability and positive landlord-tenant relationships. We remain open to any constructive dialogue that achieves favorable results and stand ready to collaborate on productive solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we have Nancy Green.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Green. I live in Providence. I'm a small landlord, own a triple-decker, and rent out the first floor. And I am in favor of this ordinance. I want to say that I agree with the need for more housing. We seriously need more housing. But what I see being built is luxury housing and high-income housing. I am not seeing a market incentive to build affordable housing. Also, young people are having a harder time living in Providence. I know so many people who would love to live in Providence. They've got a great deal to offer, but even greater Providence is just becoming unaffordable, and we're driving away some of the people who could contribute the most to our economy. In 1982, I was able to rent an apartment on minimum wage at 40 hours a week. Since then, the imbalance between the cost of living and the ability to earn a living has gotten so high that nobody can rent an apartment on minimum wage even if they are working major overtime. The cost of maintenance I've heard brought up, and my husband and I have spent a lot of money on our house this year, but this is not money down the drain. When we spend money to maintain our property, we are increasing the value of our property and our better quality of life since we live there. So it is a benefit to us as well, and it's just part of the equation. So we need to do something. We need to do it now, and this is one modest step among others that I hope will help. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Steve Stasink. Stasink. Very good.
No, nobody gets it right. I am opposed to this. And
if you could just restate your name.
My name is Steve Stasik. I'm a property manager for Stone Lake Property Management. We represent investors and property owners throughout Rhode Island and Southeast Massachusetts. We manage probably about 1,500 doors throughout both of those regions. There are some pretty impassioned arguments on both sides of this, and we understand that these are things that require some serious consideration. I could go into how this ordinance and proposal would hinder new construction, how it would affect the current properties that are out there. This evidence does exist. You can look it up. It's very simple to see that these well-intentioned proposals have negative effects on the people that they are designed to protect. I would encourage all of you to not use emotion to guide your decisions, but logic. Logic is what is going to make the best decisions for you. You're elected leaders, and your job is to protect your constituents. And I think that you'll see that evidence points to that these proposals will have a negative downhill effect on our economy and on the people that we're trying to protect. And so I ask for your careful consideration for this ordinance. And thank you for your time.
Next, we have Janelle Severino. Janelle Severino, welcome.
Saludos, me llamo Janelle Severino y estoy aquí de parte de la organización Sister Fire. Yo vivo en Ward 8 y tengo más de 20 años viviendo aquí en Rhode Island. Estoy aquí para dar mi testimonio y de que estoy aquí de acuerdo a estabilidad la renta aquí en Providence, pero también para los latinos que viven aquí en Providence. Yo duré 6 años viviendo en Ward 4 cuando comunidad estaba reposada y donde yo sentí que tenía todo lo que necesitaba. Pero mi renta, que en ese tiempo era fácil para pagar yo sola, subió doble y tuve que pagarlo con mi amiga, pero yo entiendo que sí tengo que pagar más cada año. Las condiciones del building no eran mejor. Había plomo en el baño, había plomo en las habitaciones y estaba en el camino, nunca llevaba. La casa sí se sentía fría casi siempre y afuera Cada primavera, él decía que iba a cambiar el calentador, pero no lo cambiaba. Y con la situación de las habitaciones y el calentador, yo, una persona que casi nunca me enfermaba, casi una vez mensual me daba la gripe. Mi amiga que trabajaba en nuestra casa tuvo problemas con su estómago por el plomo que existía en la casa. Aunque nuestra factura de Rhode Island Energy estaba altísimo y yo, una persona que trabajaba por un non-profit, no estaba haciendo mucho dinero, lo que yo me ganaba era para pagar totalmente la renta y la factura de Rhode Island Energy.
Janelle.
Sí.
Gracias. Ya pasaste 2 minutos.
Gracias.
But with that said, would you want to say that in English? Since I know you do speak
Sure.
English, I'll
I
give you
wanted
those
to
2 other
provide-
minutes to
yes.
convey that. Thank you.
Sure. Do you want me to provide it now? Or-
Yes. Do you have it in writing or you want to say it out loud?
I don't have it in writing, but I can provide it because I wanted to speak for the Latinos that exist
You may-
here in Providence.
You may proceed. I'll give you that other
Sure,
additional 2
thank
minutes.
you. I lived in Ward 4 for about 6 years, and my landlord, by the end of those 6 years, our rent had doubled, but the building was never improved. There was mold in the bathroom, the heater was inconsistent, and it was colder inside of the building than outside. He would always say by the time that the spring came that the windows would be changed, and they never were. By the end of it, my friend that worked from home, she had issues with her stomach because of the mold that exists inside of our home. And by the end of the 6 years, we had to move because our rent had doubled the amount. And we moved to Ward 4 instead, because if we're gonna be paying $1,700, we might as well live in a home that the heater is consistent and there is not mold. But on the other side of that, we don't have health insurance. Even then, we couldn't afford to because rent was being increased inconsistently. And to this day, as I hear from a lot of other folks from Sister Fire, we have to prioritize rent. Our utilities bill that are inconsistent again. The utilities bill was about $300 each because of the thermostat was inconsistent, the boiler that was never changed. So I speak on that behalf. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is, Councilman, we're just for public hearing. That way we can just hear the public comments. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
My testimony is written anyways, again, to show that Latinos have something to say in this city.
Absolutely. Thank you. And just for the public's and also for the committee, obviously, that's the benefit of also having members that speak Spanish and understand it, but I knew that in essence Janelle was going, with her gracious, also provided some English translation by herself, and also she'll provide that written testimony for our consideration. Thank you. The next one is Alex Gonzalez. Alex Gonzalez.
Good evening, members of the committee. I am a resident of Ward 15. I really feel like I don't have much to say at the second hearing. I feel like you guys have made the amendments worse. In regards to Section 8, you want to regulate something that is already regulated by the government. If you're going to add Section 8 apartments to that, you're re-regulating something that's already there. If you're going to pay the executive director of a board $12,000, correct me if I'm wrong, don't you all make $16,000? Well, that's what Ms. Miller just said, $10,000.
Just a quick correction, just for everyone.
Excuse me.
That's not the executive
Excuse me.
director. Oh, sorry, Chairman. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Give me 1 second, Alex.
Yep.
Councilwoman, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I just wanted to make sure it was clear. That wasn't the executive director who's making that. That's the chairman of the rent board. The executive director would be paid something else.
Okay, so the
a more
chairman of
full-time
the
job.
rent board, who's appointed with political favor, along with the other 4 members who are appointed $10,000, you as a city councilor make $16,000. So the person who's going to sit on the board is going to make $4,000 less than you. Does that make logical sense anywhere? Really? Okay. Because it fits who? Somebody that doesn't make an income, somebody that is low income. Who is this structured for? So if a counselor who bears the burden of every resident, why should somebody that's appointed to a board receive $12,000 as a chair committee or $10,000 as an appointed committee? That's ridiculous. And that's why you guys don't have your numbers correct. So I think you need to listen to Mr. Mancini, who's been here for years, and think about what y'all are about to do, because you're going to put our city in a devastation. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next person we have is Terry Wright. I'm sorry. Yes, Terry Wright. 4. Oh, okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Terry Wright, and I first just want to recollect that back in 2017, 2018, this is when the rent stabilization policy was created at DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality. And here we sit in 2026, and there still haven't been any policy that protects tenants from being priced out of their homes. I just want to say that. 2 to 3 years shy of a decade of higher rents and price gouging by landlords. Rent stabilization is a recipe for stability for rent-paying tenants in Providence, a recipe that meets the needs of a tenant's emergency. There have been over 24,000 eviction filings since 2017. And I just want to talk about the 10-year adjustment. 5 to 7 years is the standard for developers to stabilize their loans and banking business. If they can't do it in 7, then they're just exploiting low-income tenants and neighborhoods for profit. And in this moment, it feels like every word, in this moment, it feels like every ward is for themselves, instead of coming to the realization that tenants need protections, regardless of how Ward 1 through Ward 14 all of the wards, tenants need protections. And when we talk about tenant protections, we're not talking about the snow removal or dumping the potholes in the roads, all of that. We are not talking about that. We are talking about stability for our tenants. Saving tenants from being priced out should be the first priority, but instead, their lives, along with mine, hang in the balance of a veto.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next, we have Esther Oden.
Good evening. My name is Esther Oden. I live at 451 Broadway. Rachel Miller is my representative, and thank you for having me here. I have only a few words to say. When I searched for feasibility studies, I was rather surprised I didn't find any really supporting rent control. What I did find was that wherever rent control has been, or rent stabilization, and this bill is kind of a mixture of both, there have been a decrease in property values, be they multifamily or single family. And with Providence taxes, I think that if you continue to have a loss in property values, you're going to see that not only will we lose multifamily development, you're going to see single-family homes deteriorate because the property values will go down. As property values go down, the sale price will also decrease in the property, and your tax base is going to be rapidly decreasing. I would like to know, and just bring up one of the things, there are 50,000 empty units in Manhattan alone. So that's an interesting thought. My other question would be, who are the renters? What proportion are students? What proportion are working class people? And maybe there's some differentiation there. I'd like to see some numbers. I'd like to see your homework. So if you could post online the feasibility studies you did, where you got your numbers from, why you think this is going to work other than for humanitarian reasons, and that's enough in itself, but I have to know that they actually do work as a humanitarian piece. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Will Casey, 4.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Marcus Mitchell will left, so I'll be taking his place, if that's all right.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, counselors, and thank you for holding this listening session. I'm Marcus Mitchell. I'm Executive Director of Direct Action for Rights and Equality. DARE has been doing advocacy work out in the community here in Providence for 40 years, doing social justice and economic justice advocacy for our citizens. I'm here to strongly support the proposed amendments to the rent stabilization ordinance. As many have noted, Providence was recently ranked the least affordable metro area for renters in the country, with median rents rising 40% higher than in 2020. This isn't just a market fluctuation, it's a crisis that is displacing our neighbors, our families, and the soul of our city. The proposed 4% cap on annual rent increases, combined with the new amendments regarding rent board procedures and vacancy control, offers a balanced approach. It provides much needed predictability for renters to plan their lives without the terror of sudden, massive rent hikes, while still maintaining reasonable pathways for property owners to cover major expenses. By creating a stable base rent that applies to the next tenant, we prevent corporate landlords from using turnover as a weapon to bypass these regulations. We need this ordinance to ensure that housing is treated as a human right and not just a speculative investment. I urge you to pass these strengthened amendments and to stand with the renters of Providence. I'd also like to offer that research shows that the average salary increase last year was in Providence was 3.2%, which I think is well in line with 4% cap. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Trevor Chase. Against? Trevor?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm Trevor Chase. I'm with the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. I just want to point out a couple of speculative comments. One being the residential board. The language in there saying that they don't have to, but they may consider any work that does not meet this definition of substantial rehabilitation into account. We heard a lot about moldy buildings. That doesn't cover it. That's a cosmetic. So the mold in the buildings, that won't cover it. It also won't cover the lead inspection and any mitigation that needs to happen that the state had passed a few years ago. So those two things alone should be throwing up red flags right off the bat. I do also want to make a mention that there have been studies of homelessness and displacement in areas where rent stabilization is often found. Public Policy Institute of California, San Francisco homeless increased by 9.8% between 2023 and 2024. I also want to add that the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research found that in 2022, about 67% of California's homeless population was unsheltered, which is the highest in the nation. And you want to compare it to Minnesota, who is about 20, while Washington's around 50. Eviction rates, you see that eviction rates have reached an all-time a five-year high, according to Axios reports. San Francisco Examiner reported last September that eviction rates in cases in San Francisco hit a 10-year high.
Thank you.
I urge you, please base this off of facts.
Thank you very much. H.O.P.E. Cahill? Is it H.O.P.E. or Jasper? I'm sorry. Cattell. Or Cahill. Cattell. That's why you got to introduce yourself again.
Apologies for my writing.
That's okay. Apologies too. Right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jasper Cattell. I live in Ward 1, and I am here tonight as the political director of the American Federation of Teachers, Local 6516. That means I am here tonight on behalf of about 2,000 workers, or over 2,000 workers at Brown University, including research, teaching, and residence assistants and postdoctoral workers. Our members are steadfastly in favor of this bill, and with that we stand with the labor movement in Rhode Island more broadly. We already heard tonight from the AFL-CIO, and we have siblings in other unions who are deeply in favor of what is being proposed. You heard a few weeks ago at the last hearing from our president, Michael Ziegler, about why it is that we are in favor of this bill in the time, or of this ordinance. In the time since then, about 1,500 of our members began trading proposals with Brown University for their third contract. Those members have fought very, very hard for the raises that they won at the bargaining table, and yet they still find their paychecks cut into every single month by rising rents. We believe that it is essential that people who work in Providence can afford to live in Providence, can contribute to this community in meaningful ways. That's what our members want to do. And they have trouble doing it when their rents skyrocket every single year. Looking at the amendments proposed tonight, I think that there are some generous options on the table for those who may have had qualms about the bill or about the ordinance in its original form. And I would urge you to support this bill on behalf of all of our members. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Dominique Pasitelli. Dominique.
How are you? My name is Dominic Passarella. I'm a landlord in Providence, and I oppose this rent control ordinance. I want to highlight an unintended consequence that I hope you will consider on behalf of your constituents. I'll keep my remarks brief. This specific concern I want to raise tonight is that this ordinance may actually increase rents more than they otherwise would for the most vulnerable tenants. I have a tenant who lives with and cares for her adult daughter who has severe brain damage. She has lived in my three-family house since I purchased it in 2008. Because of her situation, I have always kept her rent well below market. My assumption was that I could bring up the rent to market levels once she eventually moves out. This ordinance would take away that flexibility. Her current rent is $11.25 for a 3-bedroom apartment. It is only that high because I became concerned when rent control was proposed at the state level a few years ago. For comparison, the Section 8 standard for a similar unit would be around $1,900. If this ordinance passes and I do not raise her rent by the maximum allowed each year, the unit will fall significantly below market by the time it becomes available again. This makes it much harder to continue offering below market rents to long-term tenants. It forces me to choose between my being generous to my tenants and protecting my own family's financial future, since failing to raise rents will reduce the property's value when I eventually sell. Allowing rents to reset, even to something like the 25th percentile of comparable units upon tenant turnover, would help landlords continue providing good value to tenants. At that level, it would not create an incentive for landlords to terminate leases just to raise rents, which I'm sure is part of the concern. With some kind of reset, the biggest burden of this ordinance, without some kind of reset, the biggest burden of this ordinance falls on landlords who have done their best to keep their rents low.
Thank you very much. We have James Vita. James Vita.
Good evening. My name is James Vita. I live on Vernon Street here in Providence. I've lived in Providence since 2012. I've lived in the same apartment since 2012. I'm on my third landlord. So since 2012, my rent has increased 50%, and I'm actually feel fairly lucky that it has only increased by 50% in close to 14 years. I'm here to speak in support of this rent stabilization ordinance because I think that it is important to limit the rent increases that are on the table for landlords so that tenants can stay in their units. Property tax increases are already regulated. Mortgage payments, mortgage agreements are set for a fixed period of time and set for a fixed interest rate. I think tenants should have the same expectation of a manageable, predictable limit to how high their rent can be increased, and The amendments that have been offered here tonight, I believe, offer a fair compromise to landlords. But I think it is important to remember that tenants need to be able to stay in their apartments so that everybody can live in Providence, not just people who make a very high salary or who are very wealthy. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Marvin Torres, and as Marvin's making his way up, if there's anyone sitting and hasn't signed up, please sign up now to have the ability and the chance to speak up. So, Marvin Torres. Marvin Torres, for the third time. Marvin Torres is not here. Next person is Janice. I want to say Hant. Janice.
Thank you very much, members of the council. My name is Janice Hannert. I'm a landlord in the city of Providence, and I've owned property for 40 years. I'm asking you not to pass this rent stabilization ordinance because I feel it will not achieve the objective, although well-meaning, that it's trying to achieve. The proposed amendments are also not an improvement and will make the proposed ordinance even more difficult for landlords to work with. I think at the last public hearing, the city finance director, Larry Mancini, was here, who expressed his concern about the cost to the city. Landlords want to have stable, long-term tenants, and I'm afraid that this ordinance will force landlords to raise their rents 4% every year, where they otherwise would not have. This is going to be very disruptive to tenants, to landlords, to the community, and the city of Providence. I've been a landlord in Providence for 40 years, and I do understand how this works. Also, rent control is not need-based. If you were to take the $500,000 or so that this will cost the city and use it for targeted rent subsidies, you would be able to target the funds to the low-income families that truly need the financial assistance. Right now, it just creates another level of bureaucracy on landlords that doesn't really add anything, and it certainly doesn't add any additional housing units in the city of Providence. I myself have a historic house with wood clapboards, wood siding. I'm subject to the historic district requirements, and it will cost me more to maintain my home than someone who does vinyl siding. And I'm concerned that I won't be able to maintain my home in the way it should be. So in summary, rent control will hurt the city of Providence. As you know, the real estate taxes and the assessments are based on the rents that are collected by landlords. So I feel this will bring down the value of property in the city of Providence. Larry Mancini said at the last public hearing that it will cost between $10 and $17 million.
Thank you
I
very
don't know
much.
where the city of Providence will be able to make up that revenue and what will have to be given up.
Thank you.
So in summary, I'm asking you not to adopt this ordinance. I thank you very much for your time, and I feel that the rents would be better off if they didn't have a mandatory increase.
Thank you. We have Harry Bellevue, Bellodine, or Bellevue. And Sergeant Arms, if you have another list, please give me the list, please. Thank you. Welcome. If you could please reintroduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Harrison Bilodeau. I'm a property manager, lived in Providence since 1969. Councilor Miller mentioned the importance of rules in the little preview that we had of the many amendments. And I'm speaking to you, councilors, also of rules, actually. I'm going to broaden this a little bit. I want to call your attention to the Providence City Charter, particularly Article 8 of the Charter, which is the budget. It's really of primary importance for the successful operation of the city. The first section of Article 8 concerns the process of establishing the budget, followed immediately by Section 809 entitled Reduction to Balance the Budget. The city charter is about a balanced budget. The charter does not call for diminution of investment as a means of achieving the goal of a balanced budget. I see I have only 45 seconds, so all I can say is that this proposal will retard investment and will actually hurt the people that it's supposed to be benefiting, because it will, in the long run, lead to a reduction of tax revenue in Providence. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have Greg Weiss.
Hello, I'm Greg Weiss. Thank you, members of the H.O.P E Committee. I'm a realtor and I've been a housing provider in Providence for over 20 years. I carefully reviewed the ordinance and the amendments, and I believe this policy ultimately will reduce our existing rental supply. The research on rent control and rent stabilization is consistent in one thing: they reduce the number of available rental units over time. Even the threat of rent control can discourage new construction. Recently, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey noted that similar proposals have already halted housing developments in her state. This proposal will have a similar chilling effect here in Providence. The core issue we face here is not a lack of regulation, it's a lack of housing. Providence has some of the oldest housing stock in the country, second oldest housing stock in the country, and we simply do not have enough units to meet the current demand. The most effective way to improve both affordability and housing quality is to build more housing. When supply increases, landlords must compete by lowering their rents and improving outdated units. This ordinance moves us in the opposite direction. It will make it financially difficult to invest and improve our aging housing stock, requiring housing providers to spend 15% of a property's value on improvements before qualifying for a rent increase over 4%. Many necessary upgrades, like renovating kitchens or bathrooms, cost tens of thousands of dollars, but still will fall short of that requirement. For example, if a housing provider spends $40,000 to renovate a vacant unit, but they can raise the rent only by $50 a month, the payback period is approximately 67 years. That is simply not median financially viable. So the median price for a multifamily is $550,000. 15% of that is $82,000. You have to spend $82,000. And the median rent is $1,408. So you get a $56 increase unless you spend $82,000 or more, which does not include your architectural or soft costs. It's only materials and labor per the ordinance. So,
thank you.
One last question. Can the Providence afford a policy that weakens our tax base, reduce housing supply, and fail to improve affordability while shifting costs to the taxpayers and homeowners? Thank you.
Chris Kretsch.
Hi, thank you, City Council. My name is Chris Kretsch. I am a small landlord and owner-occupant landlord in Ward 3. I have 6 units for rent over 3 properties. I would be not exempt from this policy. I already testified that I have a family member who went homeless and how these policies would not, rent stabilization would not benefit someone like him because the benefits would accrue to the wealthiest, most qualified tenants. But I'd like to pivot to something that we haven't talked too much about so far that hasn't got much attention, and that is the enforcement actions of this board, its ability to hear and adjudicate and determine levy fines, as well as to interpret, enforce, and develop procedures and standards, and also raise its own funds through the fines. So this would appear to be well beyond any checks and balances from any other branch of government, because this city council would appoint 4 people to the board and the mayor would get 1. Furthermore, if I were to appeal a decision because maybe I didn't feel like I was given enough attention because of, there's not enough time for the board members to hear things, I would appeal to the board itself. Conversely, as an analogy, if we funded our police department through fines on our citizens, we would think that would be pretty draconian. We probably wouldn't allow it, but in that case, at least the city council would have the ability to defund it, and the mayor would have also oversight authority, and the judiciary branch would have something to say about that too. But in this case, there is no such oversight by any other branch of government. That is a dangerous precedent to set. I say that as a citizen of this city. I say that as a voter in this city. And I say that as I may not know all the rules of city council, but I took high school civics and government. And division of power between the branches of governments is one of the reasons why our government has lasted this long. And that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anthony Thompson.
My name is Anthony Thompson.
Welcome.
I live in Warwick and I'm a housing provider in Providence. Affordability is one of the most pressing problems today, but this ordinance is not the answer. We are all here because of the housing crisis that is plainly caused by inadequate supply for the demand. But the updated version of this ordinance actually worsens the climate for new development. The exemption for new construction has been cut from 15 years to 10, which is where most developers will stop reading and turn to other cities. For those few who continue, they will see two things in the 20-year exemption. They will see a city that loves its union laborers, which is by no means a bad thing, but they will also see a city that is determined to tell developers how to run their projects, a flashing warning sign that they should take an off-ramp and head to a different city as soon as possible. This ordinance is going to discourage property improvements under the 15% threshold, and it will also discourage larger projects because no owner will want to spend such large sums of money with the ability to get a return on such investments in the hands of a board that they have no control over. They will simply not do such projects at all. Some will say that this is about preventing landlords and developers from making profits on the backs of tenants, but I'm here to tell you, landlords and housing providers do not actually want to see rents increase forever. We also want to see rents come down and to an equilibrium that lets tenants comfortably afford rent while also letting property owners get fair compensation for the risks and effort involved in owning and maintaining properties. But we want to see that done the right way by increasing the housing supply. Unfortunately, this ordinance does the opposite and still discourages new housing development. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. You cannot suppress rents and the income that property owners receive and thus the sale price that developers get, yet also expect those developers to act like nothing changed. Economic price controls of anything do not work. When the government comes into a market and suppresses the price of something, it removes the incentive for new actors to bring new supply into that market. Economics 101. If you enact this ordinance that will reduce the income from multifamily properties and suppress the price developers get, you will watch the same thing happen in Providence that happened in other areas that adopted rent control. Little to no new housing will be created. Our existing housing will start to decay, and there will be long waiting lines to the remaining housing stock that almost never has a vacancy. Far from helping the housing crisis, this ordinance will only make it worse.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Angelo. Angelo, sorry, I can't read your handwriting, brother.
That's okay. Thank you for having me again. My name is Angelo Capsimalis. I'm a small Capsimalis.
Capsimalis.
Okay. Kapsimalis.
All right.
I'm a small landlord here in Providence. I'm also a member of the Coalition of Housing Providers. I'm here to oppose this bill and obviously oppose the amendments. The amendments seem to be going even further the wrong direction. And we oppose the whole thing of the rent control and rent stabilization. Like various other members said earlier, you know, this is a policy that doesn't work. It hasn't worked, and it's a failed policy. You know, we want to make sure that we come up with solutions based on facts, based on studies, based on numbers, based on reality, and not just basically based on hopes, feelings, and assumptions. You know, rent stabilization is a policy that discourages, obviously, development, and also it discourages people from coming to Providence and want to invest in Providence, you know, or start new construction, new buildings in Providence. Who's going to want to come here and buy rent-stabilized apartments? You know, nobody wants the government to become so much in their business, tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it, ask them for permission, show them slips, show them receipts, you know, show them, you know, that you spend over $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 on a property to be able to be considered for a raise that would be up to a bureaucratic board. You know, and I also want to remind you, you know, earlier this last year, you know, the city of Providence had to get permission from the State House and also the Senate to raise the taxes up to 8%. You remember, and unfortunately I remember too, my taxes went sky high. And it's very unfortunate that, we have to balance the budget, and instead of pointing the finger to the landlords for the rents getting high, when the city of Providence cannot balance their own budget. So again, say no to rent control, say no to rent stabilization.
Thank you.
Yes to housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Levy.
Good evening. My name is Sam Levy, and I had a whole bunch of things that I was going to say about, but bottom line is I belong to Rhode Island Coalition of Housing Providers. I've been a landlord in Providence since 1972, and this is only going to hurt tenants in general, and it will reduce the amount of housing that's available, and I think that, if people want to control the cost of housing, they think housing is a right. It's also a right to have something to eat. But I don't hear anybody saying anything about Stop and Shop or Shaw's or anybody else saying, here's free food, or you cannot raise the price of bananas more than 4%, or eggs or whatever. I mean, if this is going to be back into the control days of the 1930s with foods, with stamps for anything and everything, how about gasoline? We need more housing, and we need rules and regulations that are going to make it so that we can have more housing instead of less housing. I think a 4% cap will guarantee everybody raising the rents 4% every single year, no matter what. It takes away the ability of somebody to choose their tenant. I'm retired. My rents are my income. This is my job. And bottom line is, we just need more housing and not games. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kate Shapira. Kate.
Thank you to the council and the members of the committee. My name is Kate Shapira. I live at 4 Brighton Street in Providence. We've heard a lot throughout these many hearings about why rent stabilization is needed for the people of Providence. We've also heard many of the things that people who live and work in Providence are afraid of from rent stabilization. And so I want to try something a little different rather than repeating some of the things that you have heard. I'm going to ask all of you on the committee and on the council, and other people who are present at the hearing can do this if they want. I just want you to think about your day. If rent stabilization passes, what is your day like? What is a day in your life like if this passes, a regular day? I just want you to think about that for 20 seconds. Picture your day. Don't talk. Just think. Really imagine it. Who are you talking to? What are they saying? What are you worried about? What relief do you have? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jeremy Costa.
Wasn't expecting to come up after that. But anyways, I want you guys to understand what, by the way, my name is Jeremy, for the council that doesn't know me. I'm usually on the other side of the fence here, and I know that a lot of you are kind of like holding your breath, like, what is he going to say? So I had to take a moment real quick, and I don't want to take up much time. I have 3 important issues. Number 1, The people that are coming up here testifying are from organizations that benefit from labor unions. Number two, the people that have spoken here are not actually subjugated to the rent stabilization ordinance. They most likely live in Section 8 housing. This is true. This is true. Number three, this is an important one. The people that have wrote this ordinance, and you will see 74 verse Pinehurst, verse New York City. You will see this because I've been speaking to the attorneys. You will see this. The people that are dealing with this, that have authored this case to you, rent reclaim. They are also in a lawsuit with the cannabis industry. The cannabis industry was supposed to fund this housing instability in these areas that are, where's the money? Reclaim has tied up opportunity, economic opportunity for these people that are living in these houses that are dealing with these issues. I'm gonna do the research and I'm gonna make sure it's sitting on your desk. I hope you guys are ready to forward all your emails because the investigation begins.
Thank you. Grisel Clemenson. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Grisel Clemenson, Ward 3, and I'm here in support of rent stabilization. It is rent stabilization, not rent control, so I will continue to
speak
do
directly to the
your
mic, please?
research.
Bring down the mic a little bit.
Yes, while
and
you'll
speak here.
continue to do the research,
Yeah, thank you.
we're going to talk about rent stabilization, which is an ordinance that allows reasonable annual increase around 4%. One moment. And while we're hearing here about solutions to build more housing, it does nothing to support families who are struggling right now. People cannot wait years for relief while rents keep rising every single month. In Providence, at least 1 in every 4 residents is elderly or living with a disability, meaning housing stability isn't optional. It's essential. Right now, too many families are 1 rent increase away from losing their homes. And yet, instead of immediate protections, we're being offered long-term promises. That is not a solution, that is a delay. And this is not rent control, this is not what Cambridge was offering, where the landlords couldn't wait for rents to reset, and tenants had to leave. That is not what Providence is offering today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Siraj Sindhu. Siraj. All right. He's here. All right. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate your time. My name is Siraj Sindhu. I live in the West End in Ward 13. I support this ordinance and I support these amendments. I'm also the executive director of Reclaim RI. Our members, our hundreds of members, support this ordinance and these amendments. I want to thank the President Pro Tem for reminding us all to say where we live. I also want to observe that many of those speaking in opposition have been quick to tell us where in Providence they own property and where in Providence they manage property, but have been silent on the question of where they themselves live. I think this is important because it reveals something that's going on here, which is many of those speaking in opposition don't live here in Providence. They don't live here, they don't vote here, but they own our homes. And they are building wealth off of our backs so that they can go on raking it in and buying more and even bigger homes in the suburbs or in South County or in other states. And I want to point out that of the pieces of testimony that the City Council received in opposition, many of them, perhaps even the majority of them, did not come from Providence residents. I would personally like to see the City Council release where those testimonies actually came from. But those of us who live here in Providence know the truth. We know we need rent stabilization. We know this ordinance will provide us the stability and predictability that we need. We know we need it because of the affordability crisis and the housing crisis, and also because of the inequality crisis in our city. Some of us have to rent, and we bleed money every month so that our landlords can build equity and build wealth, and those landlords can charge whatever they want. We are supposed to be a society of checks and balances, but the landlord-tenant relationship is unchecked and imbalanced. The landlord has all the power and builds all the wealth, while the tenant is on a hamster wheel of just surviving and not building wealth. This ordinance provides a really necessary corrective. Means-tested rental assistance programs and tax incentives may help in the short term, but they do nothing to address this deep inequality. I want to thank the council for putting forward this ordinance that does take us meaningfully forward towards addressing this inequality. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Barcher? Maybe Barcher, here we go. Welcome.
Thank you so kindly. Hello, I go by Maybe Boucher, and while I live inside my heart, I lay my head down on the south side in Ward 11. I'm an artist and resident of Providence for the better part of a decade and barely represent myself. I've moved every year of my adult life. I have experienced houselessness, and I'm in favor of this ordinance. I ask only to listen to the fears in the room. Rent control, represented by landlords and property managers with potentially thousands of units. I am afraid of rent increases. I don't have the benefit of algorithms and consultants to advise me, but I do know this cannot go on. Recent studies have found there is no affordable housing for minimum wage anywhere left in the state, let alone our capital. My father taught me arithmetic and asked me why I didn't commute to Boston for better opportunities. I asked what he thought cost was, or what it was when he did. He said $40 a month. I asked what he thought it was. He said $200 a month. I told him it was $400. He seemed shocked. I asked how much of an increase of that, and he taught me arithmetic, so I knew he knew. 1,000%. He threw up his hands. He said, well, that was the 70s, honey. I asked him how much his wages had gone up since the 70s. Rent has increased some 70% since the pandemic. How much have wages? 4% is too little at this point. Rent stabilization would be life-saving. Rent control, what has been pointed to as a pain and a fear point, would be life-giving. This ordinance is the compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. David Barkin? Is David Barkin here? Baskin, there you go.
Hi, thank you. My name is David Baskin, and I am an immigrant that came here in 1979. I've also invested in Rhode Island for the past 30 years. We started with small units, and then we added others as well throughout the years, and we continue to upgrade all of these, 2-family, 3-family units, and so on for the past 30 years. I just want to give you a couple of facts. Somebody already mentioned Maura Healey, but I'll give you a bit of background. Massachusetts, 1970 through 1994, had rent control, rent stabilization, whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing. And the value's depressed by 45%. That means tax revenue decreased by 45%. In 1994, it was repealed. Tax revenue went back up by over 45%. Maura Healey, yesterday, a Democrat governor of Massachusetts, spoke about rent control. She said that rent control is never the answer. She said, investors have already stopped planning for investment to the state until clarity of this issue is available. I am one of those developers, and I will tell you that I will not invest another penny into the city of Providence if this passes. And I've been here for a long time. I also want to let you know that the properties we own, we don't raise rent every year, but we will have to. The reason why we will have to raise rent every year is because you're not providing us any kind of cost stabilization. Cost stabilization includes taxes, maintenance, utilities, trash, wages, construction materials, and permits, all of which you're not gonna stabilize for us. I also just heard a speaker just put out numbers, and I hear numbers from the council and other places, and I want to just clarify that those numbers have no backing. I'd rather, if anybody puts numbers out like I just did, there's research and there's backing behind those numbers. And if you put out numbers like the speaker just did and just kind of work on emotions,
Thank you.
we're going to pass a law that will be faulty. Don't do that.
Thank you. Next, we have Samantha Cody. Samantha? Is Samantha Cody here? How about Hopper Kean?
Hello, thank you. My name is Harper. I live in Ward 13. What does it mean for rent stabilization to not work? The risk seems to be that investors won't make enough money to want to keep building and owning, and then everything will get worse. No new construction, no upkeep, a general abandonment of the city. Are owners really on such thin ice financially? If so, why not take that money and invest in the stock market and get 8 to 12%? Real estate investors make money from 3 sources. The first is rental income minus expenses. This can vary a lot and can even be negative on a bad year. The second is mortgage principal paydown. Again, this can be modest, though of course this is the part where somebody else is buying your house for you. The third is appreciation, the increase in the property's value. Over the last decade, property values in Providence have increased an average of about 10% per year. On a $500,000 building, that's $50,000 per year in increased wealth. To buy the $500,000 building, the investor likely put down 20% or $100,000. Even if cash flow was zero, this would still mean making $50,000 on a $100,000 investment, a 50% return. I would love to see actual profit and loss statements. I appreciate that owners can't pay bills with unrealized equity and that they need cash flow. If the math doesn't work, show us. But it seems that unavoidably, what has been a period of record hardship for renters has been a period of record earnings for landlords. And respectfully, being a landlord isn't that hard, or not hard compared to regular jobs. You can be a landlord on top of another job. A nurse can't do that. A teacher can't do that. A 4% cap would reduce landlord returns from extraordinary to merely excellent. One side is operating from a position that can't compromise, that treats any limitation on profit as theft. How do you argue with that? When is enough enough? Right now, one side gets everything and the other gets nothing. Rent stabilization asks, what if both sides got something? Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Coogan? Robert Coogan?
Thank you.
Welcome.
My name is Robert Coogan. A little bit about me. I'm a veteran, and at 28 years old, I was broken every way, physically, mentally, financially.
Can you just speak into the mic, please?
Sure.
That'd be great.
I was broken every way at 28. Being a veteran, alcohol, drugs. I got sober at the VA, and for the last 32 and a half years I've been sober, but I had nothing either, just like some of the people maybe on the other side. And thank God, I took a risk. I set goals. I bought my first 3-tenement with about 18 months sober, and I was a single father with 3 daughters. Then 5 months later, I bought a single family because I didn't want my daughters to be living with the tenants that I had there, and I wanted a better life for them. I don't recommend that. That was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I turned my 3-tenement into a men's sober house. I named it the William J. Coogan House. I work with the courts and the prison. I named it after my brother, Billy, who was 19 years old and hung himself. Drugs, depression. I did it for 7.5 years, helping drug addicts and alcoholics. But then my heart got hard. It was always about them. Being self-employed, I always had to pay highest interest rates for mortgages and refis because I was self-employed and they told me I didn't have a standard income. So I fought through all that stuff. I had some professional tenants playing games and experts on stretching the truth and the rules, which due to all their acting skills, I could lose almost everything. Running so tight financially. I had one recently who brought a pit bull into my rental property, said it was an emergency support, emotional support animal. She left it caged, and she left her under 2-year-old son on a Sunday night by itself with that dog, and my tenants were complaining to me. And she was leaving dog shit all over the place. They get free lawyers. We don't. We have to pay for everything. We have to pay your fees, your taxes, your rate, your increases, all kinds of licenses all the time for whatever we do professionally.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Can I, 2 more minutes?
No, you can't. Sorry.
I'm dumbfounded that you guys can't control your own stuff, but you want to control us.
Thank you very much. Michael Greco? Was it Greek? Sergeant at Arms, do you have any more list? Welcome, Michael.
Hello, my name is Michael Greco, and I buy and repair dangerous and neglected buildings, and I make them safe. I produce low-income housing. I rent to Section 8, and not that long ago I was on a project like this, and if a bill like this had passed, I would have lost my entire life savings. I needed to raise rents to pay the mortgage. I bought something in which there had been an unwritten rule that they would never raise rents if the tenants never complained. I was afraid that a tenant's bathtub was going to fall through the floor into the basement and kill them, and I had to ask them to move out so that I could deal with it. If this had passed, I would have lost everything. This was my 401k. I'm not a big fan of the stock market. This is how I was saving. Additionally, most of the money, in fact, all of the money over the last 3 years related to this project has gone back into the laborers, all of which were immigrant laborers. I'm drastically concerned with what this lack of investment, which will be the result of this, will do to the immigrant community. I think that in the end, the only people who would be able to afford to invest in this community will be people who, well, big companies, because they can knock down the buildings and build what they want there. You're going to force medium-sized landlords like me to sell to large corporations. There's a lot of unintended consequences here. This bill is dangerous. Lastly, I heard somebody say a little bit ago that our costs are fixed. A 5-unit building's not fixed. It goes variable. It's a commercial loan. I can't lock a 5-unit building for 30 years. Every 5 years it resets. Our economy's in a very strange place. If interest rates go up, if this gets jacked up and something like this is in place, people like me will lose our buildings, we'll lose our life savings. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, anyone else has signed up? Has anyone else hasn't spoken yet? Coming up. And this will be the conclusion of public comment after this gentleman. Then, welcome. Please state your name and...
Hello, hi, Danny Vallejo.
I'm sorry, say that slower.
Danny Vallejo.
Danny Vallejo.
I said that really American last time, so
All right.
you said it more Hispanic, and I was like, quise.
Está bien.
Anyways.
Welcome, Danny.
All right.
You got 2
It's going to
minutes.
sound very similar to my other one, but it's a reminder. So, good evening, Council President and members of the Council. My name is Daniel Vallejo. My real estate office operates here in Providence. I'm a firefighter serving this community, a housing provider, and the father of a now 4-month-old son at home. I stood before you months ago and respectfully opposed this ordinance. I stand here again today, even after these amendments, with the same concern. The core issue has not changed. Before I continue, I will say this and read this loudly. The scripture again. Galatians 6:9-10 says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good. As we have opportunity, let us do good to everybody." You guys are hearing a lot of people, different sides, different oppositions for, against. I commend you for that, number one. But don't become tired. Don't give in to all these lies that are being told to you. That is not about short-term emotion. That is about long-term responsibility. Providence residents are under pressure. We all see that. But this ordinance, even as amended, does not solve the problem. It does not create housing. It adds control, adds bureaucracy, and continues shifting power away from the people who actually build, maintain, and provide housing. And I want to be clear about something. Landlords, property owners do not hold all the power. Many are small operators, families, people trying to provide housing while carrying rising costs, regulations, and risk. This ordinance continues a trend of imbalance that will push those people out. When that happens, supply shrinks, and when supply shrinks, the people hurt the first are the very residents that this is meant to protect. Scripture warns us in 2 Timothy 4:3 about a time when people will gather voices that tell them what they want to hear rather than what is true. And in Galatians 6:7, we are reminded a man reaps what he sows. If he sows policies that restrict growth, discourage investment, and ignore economic reality, will reap deeper housing instability. This is not about politics for me. This is not about ideology, but I will say this plainly. Policies rooted in control rather than creation and restriction,
Thank
the
you.
responsibility move us in the wrong direction. Do not build strong communities. I'm going to finish real quick. I apologize for taking a little bit more time. As a firefighter, I serve people whether they live on the street or not, because community is not just where you sleep. It's who you're responsible for. As a father, I'm thinking about legacy, not just my son, but generations that come after him. The families being formed today, the women, the mothers raising children, the men, the fathers working, sacrifice, trying to build something stable.
Thank you
Genesis
very
tells
much.
us that we are called to work and take the ground care of it, to build, cultivate, and leave something better. That is
Appreciate it.
stewardship. I am my brother's keeper, and I thank you all. God
Thank
bless
you.
all.
Thank you. That concludes the testimony for today. Members of the committee, do we have any comments or before I entertain this a motion to continue? Okay. Are there any comments? Seeing none, Councilwoman President Miller?
I want to thank everyone who came to testify tonight. There's just 2 things that I heard repeated, and I also see in my email and a forum email repeated many times that are untrue, and I just thought it would be a shame to let tonight end without clarifying them. The first is that, of course, this ordinance does not regulate Section 8 housing. It never did. There's a section by request of low-income providers where we spell out all of the programs. This ordinance does not relegate, Section 8 being one of them. So the original ordinance didn't either, but by request, we spelled it out. Number 2, and this one is really worth understanding. So we talked tonight about an amendment that when you have made substantial rehabilitation, you can kind of reset from what the previous rental price was. And that is true. That is called rent vacancy decontrol. That is not the only path to provide relief of the 4%. So, and it's very clearly spelled out in the ordinance. But again, in many forum emails in my inbox, this is wrong, and I heard it a couple of times tonight. People who own property absolutely can come before the board with cost in hand, with plans in hand for any project. and seek to change rent in addition to 4%. So those are two separate cases. One of them, you get to decouple from what the cost of rent was in the apartment previously. The other one, you have a bigger project than you thought was going to happen relative to maintenance, relative to lead mitigation, relative to mold, for example, and you come before the board on a regular year and you get the exemption. So just pointing out two things that have been repeated now many, many times in my inbox and a couple times tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Councilman Royas.
Thank you, Chair. I just also want to just make a public comment. I keep hearing this. I have a lot of respect for members of the administration, but it's really important to publicly mention this, and I just feel compelled to. When they were providing the back and forth over essentially the council's fiscal note and the administration's fiscal note, the gentleman who provided the fiscal note to the council, he provided his methodology and assumptions in terms of his analysis. The administration said that they had come to, you hear a lot of the $10 million number. The administration did not elaborate on their models, their methodology and assumptions. And so that's really important. One side provided a clear methodology and was transparent about the assumptions they baked into the analysis. The other side did not include that. And so I hope in the coming days we'll get that, but at this moment, that was not provided, and I think it's important to note.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions, clarification? Excuse me, ma'am. Public comment is already ceased. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Just have one for the sponsor. There was a comment in reference that, and one of the amendments was that it was changed from a 3-unit to a 4-unit, and if, can you just expand on that, please?
I might ask staff to jump in. There's specific regulations related to housing subsidy programs in the state that talk about 4 units, also our tax rolls. And so I don't know if June or Aaron can tag in.
Thank you. June or Aaron?
Sure. Yeah, this expansion came from feedback from Rhode Island Housing. They asked us to make this change to align the ordinance with federal mortgage standards that are used by the programs that they administer. Those programs treat owner-occupied properties with up to 4 units as small residential properties eligible for first-time homebuyer financing. So that's why we made that change.
Thank you. Aaron, you good? All right, thank you very much. Any further questions, clarification? I'd like to entertain a couple of motions. The first one is to accept the written testimony that has been provided to us. Is there a motion? The motion has been made by Councilwoman Shelley Peterson, second by Councilman Sanchez. All those in favor? Any abstention? The ayes have it. Second motion is a motion to continue. And the motion has been made by Councilwoman Peterson, second by Councilman Sanchez. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any abstention? The ayes have it. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. We just voted. Motion, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion has been made by Councilman Roya, seconded by Councilwoman Sue Andoa. All those in favor? The ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.